Hi, it is a normal business day for y'all, and we would have been, hello everyone who is here with us on Central Time, who would have been joining us at 11 a.m. Central for our South by Southwest panel had this been in the flesh. And for those of you who are on noon Eastern, or if you're joining us from the UK, wherever you are, this is all about thriving in a remote office situation. So it's very appropriate, perhaps even more appropriate, that it is the very early hours of the day here. So just forgive me. I think we might actually, depending on the time of day, we might get a little sunrise going on behind me, which is very exciting. And hopefully you can see the Auckland skyline. If not, I just want to say that I am thrilled to be here. And I'm not sure that there is a more important conversation outside of the medical field to be having right now than the one that we are. So we are in the, for the timestamp on the video, we are in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. It is a very unique time in history around the world. And we are talking about how to thrive remote, which, and the end of the office. I can't think of a better person to be talking to, Sid. I'm excited to share your insights with the crew. Hello, everyone in the comments. Please, if you have questions as we're going throughout this, since this is very interactive and a little ad hoc since we're not in Austin, by all means, do say hello, ask us any questions you might have. And so real quick, a little context for those of you who may not know Sid, although I suspect if you're tuning in, you probably do. He is the CEO and co-founder of GitLab. It is a 1,200 plus team, maybe even more than that by now, that are remote, that are all remote. And it was a very interesting journey for them to get here, which I'm about to ask him a few questions about, which is very exciting. But I think that most importantly, people should understand that you're a unicorn. This whole all remote thing isn't just a fad or a Silicon Valley buzzword. It's actually an extraordinarily successful business model for you. So without further ado, Sid, I want to open us up with some giggles while people join us. And when we were doing our prep for this call, we have something in common. And we have both worked with a very unique community. So how many people out there know who the bronies are? I hope, I mean, this is where I would make you all raise your hands if we were in the same room. So for anyone who doesn't know, the bronies are grown men who like My Little Pony. Don't worry, it's not sexist. There are Pegasisters. Those are the grown women who like My Little Pony. And when we were prepping for this, I actually found it really delightful that we both know the bronies because they're a super unique and powerful community. We were talking about what was our most interesting niche community experience. We're both big fans of that. And so I've worked with the bronies in 3D printing, and they managed to facilitate essentially an open source toy partnership for us in 3D printing land many years ago. And you actually had the bronies uploading videos to GitLab, correct? If I recall?
Yeah, for sure. When we started GitLabcom, we saw a ton of usage, and it was people uploading videos. And it turned out it was the brony community who discovered GitLab.com first. So thanks for being early adopters. We did have to shut it down because it was too expensive to host all that stuff. And it was copyrighted. So we did have to shut it down, but it was great to see someone using GitLab.com when we started, because back then it was just me and one other person running that.
Did you know what the videos were when you found them?
We suspected that it was adult material, so we were very relieved that it was much cuter than that.
Yes. So if you don't know, the founding principles of the bronies are peace, love, and magic. And this is how they manage their little universe and their community. I shouldn't say little, it's actually quite big. And so considering we're in a bit of a chaotic time in history, just want to bring the peace, love, and magic today, y'all. We want to bring the brony energy and hope that even though you're not hosting those videos anymore, it's amazing that there was that much content that it was too expensive to host. That's phenomenal. We're going to bring the brony vibes to the room. So, Sid, you've got 1,200 employees. Talk to me. It sounds like, I think some people, when they look at GitLab, they think that perhaps you set out to do this intentionally. And it didn't exactly happen like that. So how did you end up starting to build an all remote team?
Yeah. I'll do the long story. The long story is that
Baby, go for it. Yeah.
the long story is Dmitry started GitLab. So he was living in the Ukraine and he had two things he wanted to improve in life. He would like running water and better collaboration software at work. And he started with the better collaboration software, made GitLab, and 300 people joined him in the first year in trying to improve it further. And I saw that a year later. I'm like, that's amazing. It makes so much sense that something you collaborate with is open source and people can contribute back to it. That's what collaboration means. So I started GitLabcom, got all kinds of usage out of it. Not very profitable, as you might imagine. Peace, love, magic, and not paying for services, I think, which is fine. But yeah, we had some amazingly big companies using GitLab, running GitLab themselves, and they were reaching out. I was easy to find. They were like, "Hey, can you improve this or that?" I'm not the world's best programmer, so then I saw a tweet of Dmitry, the author of the project, saying, "Hey, I want to work on GitLab full time," because every morning he got up, went to the well, got water, went back home, worked on GitLab, went to the office, did his job, got back home, worked on GitLab, went to sleep. So he had 2 jobs, and he wanted one job. It was enough. So we agreed on a monthly pay, and I went to the local Western Union office. And I said, I want to wire money. I was living in the Netherlands.
I was going to say, where were you at this time?
I was in the Netherlands. Yeah. In the Netherlands, they said, do you know this person, or is this someone you met over the internet?
Oh, one of those internet meetings.
Yeah.
We've all got a good reputation for that back in the day.
But, but we made it happen. So that's how we got started. And then at some point, 2014, we applied to Y Combinator. We figured that'd be really cool to kind of come to Silicon Valley. We got accepted, and I told my wife, if I ever want to raise external money, stop me, because like it makes everything so much less likely to succeed. But halfway through Y Combinator, it was like no one good, like marketing salespeople, want to work for us without getting stock options. And then if you give out stock options, but it doesn't become worth anything, that's kind of a lame deal. So we kind of figured out like why things work the way they work. And we set a goal, okay, we can do 2 things. We can do what we came here for, like, let's have a nice company in 5 years with 25 people, or we can hire like the best people we know, but then we have to become a public company. So we figured we do the public thing. We put on our website, we want to go public in 2020, and we went for it.
So wait, we haven't even talked about this. It's 2020.
Yeah.
Are you public this year? This is
we actually put a date on it as well, November 18. So I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we haven't given up on that. We're still driving for it. So we'll see whether it happens. It's not the biggest thing in the world. If it doesn't, we raised our first money in 2015. So we got a couple of more years before people get anxious, but want to go sooner rather than later, because we want to stay an independent company, and being public is a great way to ensure or to reduce the risk of getting sold.
I love it. Well, for the record, I would be a proud investor whenever that time comes. And I'm sure many of the people tuned in today would. So, and I think that's a lot because of what we're going to talk about today. So talk to me about this. All right. So you find each other, you start building the team. It doesn't actually sound like to me in studying you that you made a conscious decision to run an all remote team, but it wasn't this sort of remote first. There's a lot of terminology for those watching. For starters, GitLab has a ton of resources. If you're keen to learn more about working remote, building a remote team, if you want to have an all remote team, I actually think you have some of the best documentation on how to do this that I've seen anywhere. So go to their website and check it out. How does this come to be? Because I'm a Silicon Valley veteran, lived in the Valley for a decade, And it wasn't the trend back then that it is now.
No.
So how does it happen?
Yeah, there's kind of me and Dimitri collaborating. That's the beginning. So this starts with me sending an email. Hey, Dimitri, I'm going to start GitLab.com and you're not going to get anything out of it. I hope you don't mind. And he sends an email back. I think I phrased it as, you're not going to be involved. Do you mind? And he sends an email back. No, it's open source. Totally cool. That's great. And thanks for making GitLab more popular. So that was super like low ego, low entitlement. That was our first mail conversation. Now, the second I told about, a year later, I was like, hey, this guy that started GitLab.com, and I'm not making money, but maybe you can help these people asking for help. And then our first team member, Marin Jankowski, who still works at GitLab, was in Serbia. So it was like Ukraine, Netherlands, Serbia. So of course we were remote. And then I hired a bunch of people in the Netherlands and they came to my house. I had an extra desk. But after a couple of days, they kind of stopped showing up. And I was like, that's weird. Like,
were you a little nervous when your employees stopped showing up, just to be clear?
Yeah, I don't know. I felt a bit like, did I do something wrong? Is it not worth it? I thought, like, it was day 4, right?
It was out between us. What's going on? Yeah, no.
I showered this every day. Like, what's wrong? But I was like, well, it kind of makes sense. And they were online. They were working. I saw the output. So we kept working like that. And then with Y Combinator, they make you come to Mountain View as the founders. And we figured we need to bring everyone because otherwise we're going to be very distant. And that made sense. And we did it's like eerie, like Silicon Valley, like we were all in the living room with our laptops in a house in the suburbs. It's
like the scene in the show. For the record, the Valley actually is a bit like the show. And yeah, for better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
Yeah.
And then they told us, look, this remote thing works with engineering, but it doesn't work with sales and marketing and finance and everything else. And we're like, that makes total sense. Let's get an office. So we got an office in San Francisco, above Mike's Bikes on 8th and Howard, and the intersection with most police reports filed in San Francisco. And we put a bunch of desks in there. The landlord had a bad experience with the previous tenant who put 15 desks in there and a big fan in the door. So I think we put 9 desks in there, and they were empty most of the time. I think the first person to come into the office was Hayden, who was working in sales. He was living in Alameda. It was like a 1-hour trip for him. And like after 3 days, he doesn't show up anymore. And every single time it went like that. Like we hired a great sales person, and he was living south of Sacramento. Took him 2 hours every day. And he did that for like years of his life, 2 hours each way, every single day. And he's like, oh, this remote's not going to work. We need people. I'm like, I'm fine. Yeah, we got an office. Like, I want to use it.
Right.
But after 3 days, guess what? The person from Sacramento is like, this is awesome. I save 4 hours a day. This is the best thing ever. So we kind of like every time we went to it and we're like, we're not against it, but let's see how it pans out. And then at a certain point, it was like, okay, let's do it. And also people didn't believe that we really weren't there at the office. So we got a telepresence robot. We call it Beamy. And Beamy.
Oh, yeah. Was it one of those rolling ones?
Yeah. So everyone in the company had an account there and they could see it. It was just me there. There wasn't some super secret office. One person kind of scared me by creeping up behind me and then saying, hello. Yeah, so that's how it became. From at a certain point, we were like, this makes sense. We're just going to continue doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a happy accident. I think that's one of the things that I sort of took from talking to you and talking to Darren in prep for this was, it's not like you woke up and said, we're going to start an all remote company. So if you're out there listening to us right now, it's not that this has to be the foundation of your business vision. It sounds to me like you really were responsive to those initial employees. And it's pretty impressive that you've gone from that initial clutch to now, I mean, how many do you have? Oh, it's over 1,200, right?
Yeah. And I do think, although we didn't plan it and we were never like religious about, we per se want to be all remote, I do think you have to be very intentional about it. You especially have to be intentional about informal communication. Like if that's not happening as automatically as it would in a normal company. Now, in a normal company, it costs a lot of time, like people have their commute time. And it's not perfect, like people all know the people on the same floor, but not the other floor. So by no means that's perfect. But if you're remote, you get to do it better and more efficient. You save on the commute time, but you still have to organize it. So for example, if you join GitLab, we make you do coffee chats. So you get used to a format where it's normal to just plan 25 minutes with someone else without an agenda. You can talk about work, or you can talk about life outside of work.
So let's talk about that. Is that a one-to-one thing? Is that a group thing? What's a coffee chat for you? Because as we get into the actionable tools, because I'm sure there's a ton of people in the audience. So two things, folks. Again, reminder, you are welcome to ask us questions. I can see the live chat right now, despite the fact that my eyes are barely open. And I also, tell us how long your commute is. Let's give a shout out to whoever has the longest commute and however much time you would save if you didn't have to commute, or maybe you're not having to commute right now. So I think that I asked a ton of people a bunch of questions just to see what people wanted to know from this. And one of the big things that came up, Sid, was how do you maintain the human connection? And I think that that's what you're talking about right now. So tell us about the coffee chats.
Yeah, so the coffee chats, it's a normal thing. And if you just want to get to know someone better, you can just shoot them a calendar invite. You don't have to explain yourself. That's just a thing we do. There's also the company calls. We call them the breakout calls, and you just hop on with a bunch of people. It's based on a shared interest. So if you want to chat, if you're more interested in chatting about children and how they're doing, you get to meet with other people who are fond of that. If you're more into certain hobbies, we have a channel for that. We also have a thing called group conversations. Those are more business oriented. It's a certain department of the company. They have a presentation with like everything you want to know about that department. Sometimes a video, which you can view like the day before on YouTube. The 25-minute max meeting itself is just Q&A. So as soon as we run out of questions, we end the meeting, and it's just people asking questions about the materials or about that department. And it's a kind of an informal way to get to know what's going on in the rest of the company. We also
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Oh, I think I like what you just touched on, and I actually haven't asked you this question, so I'm excited to ask it. Do you think you have more or less meetings having an all remote team?
As a CEO, I'm in meetings almost the entire day, just because for me, I can talk faster than I can type. I can relay more context, so it's an efficient medium for me. I don't think it's different per se. It's just that at GitLab, we have people across 60 different countries, so we have to work across time zones, so we have more of a written culture. So I think we have fewer meetings than comparable companies. Although I must warn, like there's one thing, in normal companies, you run out of conference rooms at a certain point. With all remote, the Zoom rooms just keep on going. So there's not that natural limiter, but we do try to prevent meetings. We call meetings as a last resort. If we can just do something.
What a novel concept. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who are going to a lot of meetings that they think could be more efficient. And just imagine if when the questions were done, like you mentioned, the meeting was over and then it was a last resort instead of a first step. Novel, very novel.
One other thing I really like we have at GitLab is that you don't have to pay attention to the meeting. So you're totally encouraged to do anything else, even browsing Facebook during the meeting. That is not frowned upon. You don't have to focus on the meeting. For many meetings, only a part of the meeting is interesting to you. That's fine. If you have to ask like, oh, can you ask that again because I wasn't paying attention? That's okay. I say that once every day. It's okay. We want people to be the boss of their own time and their own attention. And we think that should go for meetings as well. And we think it's ridiculous that some companies say, oh, you have to pay attention the whole meeting. The whole meeting sometimes isn't interesting. Allow people to zone out. They got enough to do. They got to check Facebook too. They got to do their email and Slack and everything else. Allow them to do that.
That is an incredible thing to hear from someone, especially in your position. Tell us your least favorite meeting every week in the comments so we can all have a chuckle about it. I think that what you're providing your community and your employees with is a lot of agency. You're trusting them. And I think that's one of the fundamental things that in getting to know you and the company has been GitLab wouldn't function without trust. If you didn't trust your team and your process and your documentation, I don't know that you would have been able to scale in the way that you have. And it's really compelling when you think about it. I mean, we're both executives. I've never been in a situation where I was told I didn't have to pay attention in the meeting. It's our job in theory to always be paying attention and treat everyone like a little special unicorn. So I think that that's pretty special for folks who aren't as familiar. And I think there's a little bit of a magic to why people don't have to pay attention in a meeting. How do you make sure that, and this is something you're doing exceptionally well, how do you make sure that everyone in all the different time zones, in case they wanted to know what happened in a given meeting or in a situation, know what's going on? Talk to us about your documentation process, because it's epic.
Yeah, we record most meetings, so most of the time there's a recording available. We live stream some of them, so if you Google GitLab Unfiltered, you'll see lots of boring meetings on our YouTube channel. But also, well, they are boring meetings. Like, there are just regular run-of-the-mill meetings. It's nothing special that has to be. I watched one of the clips today that was recorded today. I started watching someone building a new roof on his house halfway through because that was way more interesting.
Same castle we were talking about the other day.
Yeah, the castle we were talking about the other day.
I've been watching it since you brought it up. I love it.
Anyway, our meetings, they always have a Google Doc. There's an agenda in that doc, and then we take notes in line, and we're very good at note taking. So you commonly have like 2 or 3 people taking notes at the same time. Also, if you ask a question, it's common to first put the question in. That allows people, it's always hard to hand off the word in a remote meeting because of the latency in a video call. That allows you to just see like, hey, Sean, I saw you had a question, please verbalize it. And then a person, even though the question's already typed up, verbalizes the question, you give the answer that's written down by a note taker, and you move on. So there's a complete and pretty good written record of the meeting so people can catch up asynchronously. I want to get back to something you said, saying that we're a high trust company. I think on one hand we are, we're pretty trusting of our people, but I don't think trust is the magic. I think measuring output is what matters. So we do try to have decisions being taken at the lowest level. So the concept of a directly responsible individual. If you do the work, we try to have you make the decision. We're not always able to do that. Some decisions affect more people, etc. But we try to practice that, and we'd rather have kind of the wrong decision executed with enthusiasm than the other way around. And we try to measure output really well. We got lots of KPIs. Everyone has a manager that understands what they do. So we don't do cross-functional teams. Everyone has a manager that understands your craft and can measure your results. And we're very output oriented. We don't care about your input. We don't care whether you're paying attention during the meeting or how many hours you're working. Unless you're working too much, then please stop doing that. But we do measure your output, and we hold people accountable for that.
So you're essentially allowing each one of your employees to optimize their performance and their agency as long as they're hitting their targets. And whatever that looks like in their given day or their style or their process, as long as that's communicable across the team, you're good.
Yeah, exactly. So as you work remote, there's not having a commute, but there's also the flexibility to live wherever you want. Maybe your partner needs to move and you can follow them. Maybe you want to live closer to your parents, you can do so. There's also like the aspect of an off-peak lifestyle. You can go to the gym or the supermarket if you're still there with the coronavirus whenever it's quiet. And you have more flexibility. If you need to take care of your kids or something else, you can intersperse that, and there's no set hours. Of course, there's sometimes meetings and we expect people to cancel in advance and to show up and things like that, but show up if they're elementary to the meeting. But all in all, we try to give a lot more freedom. Yeah.
So, and that's beautiful. I mean, I think it's fun. You see it tied to output. And as you're saying this, though, I feel the trust that you have in the team. If you didn't trust them, they couldn't have that autonomy. It just
Yeah, I don't know. It's trust. I think it's caring about the right things. If you're going to measure hours worked, you're going to get hours worked.
Yeah.
We care about output. We get output. We are
Results driven. It's all about results.
Yeah. Our engineering manager just remarked yesterday that as we tripled the team last year, we got more output per team member instead of less. That is ridiculous. I've not seen another company that almost tripled headcount in engineering in a year and that didn't have a big drop. It's very encouraging to see.
Yeah, that's fantastic. How do you measure that? And talk us through some of the tools, because I can see some of the audience questions coming in right now. And I know we're all really keen to learn how to replicate what you've done. So how are you measuring that output? And then also what tools are you doing to make sure you're optimizing that output?
Yeah, for engineering, it's notoriously hard to kind of have effectiveness. And there's all kinds of things with weights on issues and planning poker and things like that. We don't believe in that. We believe in reducing cycle time. So going as fast as possible from I want to do this to I have an iteration out there and people are using it. And that's what we optimize for in our metrics. For engineering, one of our most important metrics is merge request rate. How many separate kind of functionally pieces of code did you ship? And it's something we want you to game, because you can game it by shrinking kind of the scope of what you're building and shipping it in smaller iterations. That allows us to go faster. That allows us to get feedback earlier. That allows us to reduce risk, to make reviews easier and better. So that's the thing we want you to game and make it smaller. And it's been a super helpful metric, because most metrics, if you start aiming for them, they dissuade from the goal. This one is one where you start the game and it actually helps.
Oh, that's fantastic. There's a phrase that the first time I heard it, it freaked me out, but the more I think about it, the better it is. It's set the bar low and clear it often. So you're better off delivering and shipping and creating and being able to hand off or let people do things than you are coming up with this huge concept that may take a really long time to get out the door and get buy-in and do the whole thing.
Exactly. We call it iteration. Just make it smaller, get it out there, and move on to the next thing. By the way, I see a remark from Lens in the comments. He says, working from home since 2002. MySQL really pioneered distributed company thing back then. And I totally agree. It's a big inspiration. Actually, I had the privilege of Monty, the founder of MySQL, warming up his alcoholic drink in my microwave back in the Netherlands. That was fun. And telling stories about how the entire test infrastructure for MySQL was in his basement.
Wow, that's a magical little serendipitous connection that we couldn't have even anticipated. So breaking that down a little bit, that's adorable, but breaking this down a little bit more, what tools, what platforms, what software, what collaborative tools, so everyone here who is, I mean, we have to call a spade a spade. We're in the middle of a very unique time. Lots of people in quarantine, lots of people working from home, lots of people not congregating in their offices, even if they're not all remote, like both of our teams are inherently. What are you using? What's your playbook so everyone can copy it?
Yeah, we live in Slack, we live in Zoom, and we live in GitLab. Those are essential. I think we also really love the collaborative editing aspect of Google Docs. Mm-hmm. Slack is just great. If you need to get to someone quickly, you can use it. You get an overview of kind of what people are working on, the non-urgent thing, get more context. Zoom has been a blessing. Like the quality, the ease of live streaming and recording has been amazing. It really helps being able to hang out with 400 people at the same time if there's a need for that, or an all hands or something like that. It's been great. We use GitLab extensively. Like GitLab is a complete DevOps platform delivered as a single application. So all the way from planning what you want to do with issues, all the way to monitoring the code as it comes out. We try to dog food and use our own product as much as we can.
That's fantastic and nice and succinct. So is there any process, and I only say this as someone who's shared a lot of docs, I'm a Google Doc fan myself, is there any process for, and this is a question from the audience, is there any process in terms of who takes notes or who contributes to notes? Is it everyone? Is it managers? How does that work?
Yeah, so for me, it's a bit different. I have two CEO shadows, and maybe Sean, maybe you can introduce yourself and say what you do and say how tough the work is taking notes all the time.
Sure, my pleasure. So my name is Sean McCann, currently on the CEO Shadow program. If you want to get a good insight in that, if you Google GitLab CEO Shadow program, it'll give you a full overview of what it is that we do, what's expected, all the rest of it. My regular day job is as a support engineering manager for APAC. So I'm currently in fairly sunny San Francisco from even sunnier Sydney, hopefully on my way back this weekend. As a CEO shadow, one of the biggest responsibilities is note-taking. I think anyone that's been in any kind of meeting with multiple participants knows it's very difficult to try and engage and participate while also taking notes. So by removing that overhead and burden on Sid and the rest of the exec team in the meetings that we get to sit in on, they're able to fully engage. Now, the cost of that is you need to be very, very quick because people obviously talk a lot faster than they write. It helps having two shadows so that we're able to bounce back and forth between each other to make sure that one person is taking notes for one person and kind of alternate that way. It does change a little bit when the audience is bigger, just because it's too much for only two people. And then we start to get into some of the more standard operating procedures at GitLab where people are pretty much responsible for their own note-taking. As Sid was saying earlier, if you want to ask a question, it needs to be in the doc. No one else is going to put it into the document for you, so it's your responsibility to do. But with Sid and just the sheer volume of meetings that he has and the different variety of meetings that he has, which as a CEO of a large hypergrowth company, you can imagine what that's like. It's really us trying to capture the essence of what's being said, hone in on what that iterative step is going to be, because ultimately we want some kind of a result to be coming out of these meetings and make it clear enough so that anyone in the company, because we're very intentional with our transparency, is able to follow the flow of that conversation and understands exactly what the next thing is. Happy to give more details, Sid, if you want me to go into
Yeah,
that.
thank you, Sean. And just for clarity, like the CEO Shadow program was to give more people in the company kind of a company-wide overview. It turns out it's great for note-taking as well. In most meetings, like suppose you have a meeting with like 5 participants, you put in your question in beforehand, so you type that out. And then the answer, many times, either someone else types it up, or if that doesn't happen, the person who asked the question will type the response up as soon as they moved on to the next question.
And how long have you been doing this CEO Shadow program? I think it's actually very cool.
I think since May, there's a schedule with alumni on the if you Google CEO Shadow. So
anyone can be your shadow, right?
Not anyone. There's eligibility criteria. So, for example, you need to have a certain level within the company, or you need to be, for example, from APAC, where it's harder for us to collaborate, to work across time zones. So that's Sean, for example, got that, and also want to promote diversity. So if you're a member of the underrepresented group, that counts. There's the criteria are listed.
I think it's really compelling, and it's been fun seeing Sean as your shadow and getting to hear this narrative as we've been working on this together. So this all sounds very lovely and like it was a smooth process for you, but I'm curious, 2 big questions. How did investors respond to this? Was this accepted in the Valley? Did they want you smashed inside a house like we've seen on the TV show? What was the culture like in the beginning when you were raising capital, especially?
Yeah, I think in our A round, it happened so fast that there wasn't much attention paid to it. And also we had an office at the time and the plan to be a co-located company. With the B round, it was super controversial. We had a really great investor drop out and say, look, you take all the boxes except this remote thing. We've not seen that skill before. We're not saying it's not going to happen, and we're not saying it won't be successful. It's just a risk, and we can afford not to take that risk. So we're out. So that was super sad.
Wow.
The person that ended up investing was Willy Ilchev. and he said, look, I'm not sold on this remote thing. You please show me why that works. So I prepped a presentation, pitched in, and he's like, yeah, I'm still not convinced. And then we had a person, an associate in the meeting, Abe, and Abe said, look, Philly, you might not be convinced, but I read their handbook, and like I read it overnight, and it's like the best process document I've ever seen. These people have their stuff buttoned up more than any other startup. So this might very well work. So that him vouching for us and him doing the homework really helped. And now, because they've seen kind of the impact on the talent we're able to hire and retain, they're now recommending it to new companies. Like there's some of our investors turned from like, I don't know, to now like, we're going to try to get more companies to do this, and we're going to try to invest in companies that do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. They've shifted from skeptic to advocate. And I think that you've very much led by example with that. And largely through your documentation. If you haven't checked out the GitLab handbook, I personally have learned a ton from it the last few weeks. And as you're potentially transitioning into a new working environment, legitimately check it out. There is probably something in there that applies to just about every business model, even if you're not a code-based startup or a scaling business. I think no matter your size, there are really resourceful tools in there for how to communicate, how to document, and how to hand off between different groups, different time zones, and not having the physical proximity of an office. So do check out those resources. Sean, I'm going to help you. I see you dropping links in the chat, so that's great. Everyone can jump into that. I know you and I both run remote companies. It's wonderful. We love it. Is it for everyone?
I'm not sure. I don't think so. First of all, like if you don't have a digital product you're delivering, it's super hard. So if you're running a hospital, you can't be all remote. The second thing is some people really like the vibe of the office. Some people like the work life or the work private life separation that it brings. My wife likes an office. It's closed now due to the virus, but she loves going to work, and she doesn't want to sit at home all day. I think for me, it doesn't feel like sitting at home all day. Like I'm still talking with people. It's still a very social experience, but I can imagine people preferring an office. So I don't think it's for everyone, and I do think it's possible for the majority of people.
Do you ever think you've lost a great recruit because it wasn't their style? This question came up a bit on the internet.
Yeah, obviously we did. I think for most functions, it's just a super benefit. We get over 10,000 applications of people wanting to work at GitLab every month. That's amazing for considering our size. That is outsized. We did lose like people we were interviewing for like executive positions that couldn't get over it and ended up dropping out. I think the vast majority said, look, I've not done this before. I'm skeptical. And then they went and talked to the other executives at GitLab, like, hey, do you have a good connection with the other functions and everything else? And they said, well, I was skeptical too, but actually I have a better connection and it's easier to reach people and I have more influence and I can communicate better. So most of the time I think it's less than 10% of the executive recruiting candidates that dropped out because of remote.
I can imagine, and I just want to call out a stat that's shared in the comments here. 93% year over year retention. That is amazing. Has this all remote team and this retention, has it become at all more challenging as you've gotten to the scale that you're at, or has it been a fairly smooth process from that initial core team that decided not to work in an office?
I think fairly smooth. I'm sorry, I was answering questions in the chat. You see now that value of paying attention. I'm practicing myself.
No, I'm just wondering if it ever be. I mean, your employee, your roster has grown immensely in the last 18 months, and I'm curious if that created any challenge for your communication tools and for anything else, or if it's been sort of this smooth ramp all the way up.
I think that the thing that is breaking down is the breakout call, the company call. I don't think we do a good enough job matching people with their interests. For example, there's a hobbies call. Oh, that's great. But like some people love mountain biking and some people love skiing. And like, there's so many hobbies, like it doesn't make sense to all group that in a call. So I think we got to get more granular there. I think we got to have like Slack channels where you kind of hang out throughout the week as well. And the call is kind of an extension of that.
Like internal subreddits almost.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So I think that's broken down and we're still trying to fix that one.
I think that's good. And I think I want to kind of close out our chat talking about that a little bit, because we've talked a lot about process and approach. How do you bond? How do you have these great team moments and bring people together? I know there's chats and coffee chats, but you also do some group trips, right?
Yeah. So look, we bond over video calls. Some teams have team calls where for an hour a week, they just hang out together, not to get work done, just to hang out together. We do bring the whole company together once a year. We were supposed to do that like next week or the week after in Prague in Europe. Understandably, that's now delayed, but we've had some amazing trips. We went to Crete and Cape Town and Mexico and all kinds of great destinations. And in that week, it's not a vacation. It is business oriented, but we don't try to do work. The first half is excursions, but the goal is to get to know people outside of your function. The second part is an unconference where it's kind of the more softer topics, and sometimes it's a bit of training or things like that. People pick whatever they want to do. The most popular topics tend to be preventing burnout and lack of motivation. And people talk about that in small groups. It's not recorded or anything. And it's just to get to talk about these tougher subjects in face-to-face. We also do a sales kickoff for our sales team once a year.
So, and everyone gets to come to these offsites and these trips, correct? It's inclusive of the whole.
Yeah, it's called Contribute. I linked it in the chat earlier, and it's once a year, and everyone's invited. It's not mandatory, and about 85% chooses to be there.
That's fantastic. What's your biggest challenge right now?
I think we're not as diverse of a company as we want to be. And we got over the biggest focus is gender diversity. And we got over 5,000 applications a week from females. So that's great. But we want to be even better. And we think that with reaching out to people, we can get a higher level of talent, but we have more control of where we reach out. And that's going to be based on increasing diversity in the company, but also having a lower location factor. So we pay market wage for wherever you live. So for us as a company, it's also attractive to hire people outside of the big metro areas where there's lots of competition.
Yeah, and I think you probably, there's a lot of different slices to the diversity pie. You mentioned 60 countries. You definitely have a geographic diversity across the board. So ladies out there, apply to GitLab. It would be an amazing job. 5,000, be the 5,001 and be the next female lead. We need more strong women in tech in general. And what a fun role. I think that you're highlighting a lot of really awesome things that have helped you grow. So what's your advice here as we start to wind up our time? If I'm a team who is, and I realize this may not be your area of expertise since this was all remote kind of from the get-go to a degree, but if I'm someone who worked for a company, it doesn't really matter the size, and all of a sudden I'm working from home and I'm hoping to stay connected and stay productive, what are your top 3 tips for everyone now, all of a sudden in self-isolation or in a slightly different working environment?
Yeah, make sure your setup is great. And that's anything from a standing desk to headphones, so that you're not echoing the call. I think the toughest thing in the beginning, if you're living with other people, is like making clear that you're home but working, especially if you have younger children. So a certain amount of consistency there, but also compassion, and that's kind of not necessarily a balance, but that takes some getting used to for everyone, and keep having to explain it again and again that you have to keep working. It's not playtime for the entire day, but also feeling that freedom to kind of have a bit of playtime during the day. So getting the hang of that, and getting kind of buy-in from the other people you live with. And the third thing is I think a lot of people feel like they have to be present all the time. Like their Slack icon has to be green, or they got to immediately respond. So I think it's very important to as a company, not set those expectations. For example, at GitLab, people are forbidden from thanking each other publicly for working outside of office hours, of the local office hours. It's great if someone did that, but we don't want to encourage it. So we're not, you're okay, you can thank them for it, but not in a public channel, because we don't want to get that culture where that is celebrated.
That's actually a really beautiful thing I just want to highlight for a second. So especially in the Silicon Valley, we have a real hustle culture. There's this lack of sleep and high performance that's often celebrated and glorified. I'm personally not a fan. And I think that you just touched on something really important. So was that a cultural choice you made from the beginning to have better work-life balance? Is it something that you ebbed into? Talk about that just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think you want a company, you want to work in yourself, and that's just super, super important. Let me see if I can share this, whether there's any other stuff on my desktop.
Just videos of castles being built out of shipping containers, I assume.
No. So yesterday, with the shadows, it's great. They were still in they work from my living room, because we don't have an office. And it's a lot of people still insist on an in-person meeting with the CEO. So I receive visitors to the house at home. Yesterday, I took off at 4:30, and so they took pictures of that, and they shared it with the rest of the company. And the rest of the company said to say hurrah for my cat, who's getting a bit company famous now. But that's kind of that tone gets set from the top. Like I took 7 weeks of vacation last year, and I made sure everybody knew about it.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to see you on Playa again this year, right?
No, I'm not doing very. I'll probably be canceled. Let's hope the whole world doesn't turn into survival. But I'm not doing Burning Man again this year. But it was a lot of fun. I went 4 times to Burning Man.
What a shame. I was hoping to see your ski suit out there. We'll have to share that photo separately in the chat. Well, I unfortunately, this wonderful chat is actually wrapping up here, and I know you have a very busy day ahead. One last question to close on. Do you think you are more productive because you're all remote?
Oh yeah, so much more. I think like our meetings start on time and they end on time. I've not seen that with any other company. And if we're in person, it's actually not true. They start late and they go overtime. So I think it's amazingly how more disciplined you are. It's so much easier to create artifacts when you're remote, and that allow you to go through things very, very fast. There's no time lost, even like traveling between buildings and things like that. And yeah, and you're able to focus your attention. And you don't always have it perfect, but you're much more in control than you are in a meeting room without your computer in front of you. So I do think it makes us all more effective, not in the least because it it allows to use the best medium, and the best medium in an office by default, it's a meeting, and here we're much more conscious about that.
Yeah, you really have done an outstanding job of getting people to optimize their output and their efficiency. in a place where they can communicate transparently. I think the all remote actually is a great equalizer across the board and makes it seem less like a hierarchy in certain circumstances, and gives everyone equal access to information, which is something that has been very fun in learning about what you're doing at GitLab. So Sid, thank you so much for joining me today and for being a part of this chat. I think it is extremely important that we had this conversation. Thank you all for coming to South by Southwest, baby. You know, it might not exactly be the format that we anticipated, but we are thrilled to have had you all join us. I think over the course of this, we've had at least 50, if not 100 participants. And I'm sure that those of us on this call from a support standpoint will answer your questions as they continue to roll in, and do share this talk out with all of your friends. And if you're feeling freaked out about working remote right now, hopefully you feel a little bit calmer. I think that Sid and the team have done a fantastic job of showing us how to do it. Do check out the handbook, do check out the resources. It's just an immense database of information that they make public for all of us to benefit from. Any closing thoughts? Anything you want to say at the end of this, Sid? Any call to action?
I think you did that already, so thanks for that. And thanks for hosting this, and thanks for bringing your enthusiasm. This was really fun.
My pleasure. This is such a joy. You know, maybe if everyone continues to love it and we continue to be in the state of the world, we can do a follow-up to this as a South by round 2. Who knows if we'll ever end up in Austin. Looking forward to it. Thank you so much, Sid. Your insights are absolutely priceless. And thank you to the entire GitLab team for all of your enthusiasm, support, your questions. Darren, it's been such a pleasure to work with you on this. And to everyone in the comments, thank you for bringing your energy, your enthusiasm, and your joy to remote life. Considering it is 5:53 a.m. on a Saturday, I have to say I needed it, and it is awesome that we were all here today. So mwah. We will sign off for now and let Sid go back to the many calls he has today. I know Darren has let me know that we are not supposed to go over time, so I am being very conscious of that. And do tweet us. I'm Savvy, and Sid's much easier to stalk even than I am. And say hello, tell us what you liked. If you have any following questions, yeah, it's Saturday down in the Southern Hemisphere. I see some questions there. Welcome to the Dateline. It's a whole different ball game. Again, my name is Savannah Peterson. You've had the CEO of GitLab, Sid. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and good luck. Stay safe, wash your hands, feel comfortable working from home, do a live video chat and talk about your cat to still bond. That social energy is really important right now, especially more than ever, as the world is a very weird and strange place. On that note.
Peace, love, and magic. Have a good one.
Peace, love, and magic. Yes, that was the close I was looking for, Sid. That's great. Everyone, spread the peace, love, and magic, and we'll see you next time on Virtual South by Southwest.